Okay, so at what age did you decide, to specialize in the hammer throw?
So, age, I was probably 19, 19 or 20 when I decided that I wanted the hammer throw to be my specialty. Um, and the reason for that really was because on the west coast of the United States, high schools are actually not allowed to do the hammer throw. So a lot of my local competition was on the same playing field as I was, as far as their experience that they had. Um, so that's really what appealed to me, instead of going against initially like the shot putters and discus throwers who had been perfecting their event for multiple years before getting to college. To start, my competition was kind of, we had a level playing field. And then once I was able to compete at higher and higher levels, and beat some athletes who had been maybe on the East Coast and throwing for a few years before college, that's when I really decided, like, okay, I actually could be pretty good at this event, and not just in Southern California, but in the United States, and then eventually in the Philippines.
So, in other words, you specialized later in the hammer throw because, one, it was an event where you're not really allowed to do it in high school. And secondly, because you basically started in athletics a bit older, you decided that it would make more sense because, everyone else has to start, everybody else had to start at that point as well. So they wouldn't have had as much experience as throwers and shot putters and stuff. Did you actually start off in the shot and the throw when you were in high school, or how many years did you have any years of doing those events as well?
You're asking if I had experience in any of the other throws events before?
Yeah, before specializing in the hammer.
No, so before I got to my university, I had 1 day of throwing experience. So I went out to my high school track team to try out for throws there, and they didn't have a coach. So I threw a couple times, and at that time, my focus was not on throwing. It was not on athletics. It was on basketball and football. So I decided that I didn't want to pursue it at that time. And then, I mean, obviously, I'm very glad that things kind of developed the way that they did later in my athletic career.
Okay, so we just touched base on this before. So you were doing, prior to doing hammer throw, you were doing things like baseball, basketball, and American football prior to moving into the hammer throw. So I understood you did throw a bit of shot put and discus as well. We observed that when you came over to the Philippine Nationals in 2015 and won the 3 titles. Did you just pick those shot put and discus events up in college then in that case?
Yep. So all 3 of the events, I actually, when I initially joined the athletics team, I wanted to be a javelin thrower.
Yep.
So I didn't really have an intention of throwing the hammer, the shot put, or the discus. I wanted to throw the javelin. And it just so happened that my coach, or my university coach, as soon as she saw me, she told me that she wasn't going to let me throw the javelin because she wanted to develop me in other ways. And the javelin, I guess, is really easy to injure your shoulder.
Yeah. So when the colleges, I believe this is UC, is this UC Riverside?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So when the coach came to recruit you from UC Riverside for throwing events, as you really didn't have that much of a prestigious high school career, or you weren't really, like, you were more in team sports at that point, what do you think was the reason why the coach decided to recruit you for UC Riverside, knowing that, she would have to develop you into a thrower with not that much experience in the throwing events?
So my coach, before I got there, she took pride in being able to transition athletes out of other sports or out of other athletics events and make them successful throwers. And she had an idea once she saw me in person, and she saw kind of like my build, and she wanted me to just walk onto the team right then and there.
Yeah, so like, in other words, you probably would have also been thinking that, you know, if I have a guy who's a raw cut diamond, then I don't have to fix, you know, bad habits he's picked up from from a previous coach, because he hasn't had a previous coach really in the throwing events. So this is basically somebody she could mold who hasn't, you know, had any, you know, hasn't picked up any technical issues, because, you know, basically she's teaching you as a beginner in the throwing events. Now, regarding, if you don't mind me asking, regarding, you know, like how as I guess, she would have picked you up because of your size, you know, good size to be a thrower. What exactly was your height and weight at the time when you were drafted to?
So at the time that I got to UC Riverside, I was 6'2". I'm not sure what the meter conversion is for that. I was 6'2", and I want to say like 220 to 230 pounds. Yeah, when I first started.
That's a big boy.
Sorry, go ahead,
That's
Bruce.
a big boy. I mean, I was meaning to ask him what's your size, and I wish I was that tall, but I was on the shorter end as a thrower,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, 6'2", 220. That's a good throwing size right there.
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so when you were at your prime of, you know, when you were at your throwing prime and you threw the 68, 66, were you heavier, or were you around the same as 220, 230?
I was a lot heavier. So when I threw my farthest distances in the hammer, I was probably around 255 to 260. And a lot of that, I mean, I want to say that most of that was muscle. But I mean, being a thrower, we are able to get away with a lot of dietary things that other athletes can't get away with. So I was very happy with throwing, like lifting in the morning, then going and eating a big breakfast, then going to my classes, then having practice in the afternoon, then having a huge dinner and not having to worry about it. And I got stronger throughout. So for me, it was not as much about my weight or my body composition or anything like that. It was more so about the type of strength that I needed and where I needed it on my body. And as long as I had that, I was completely fine.
So that brings us actually to our next set of questions, which have come from a friend of mine. He's the statistician for Southeast Asia and Malaysia, Jad. I'm not sure if you know Adrian Sprints, Jad Adrian Washif. He's a strength and conditioning coach, former sprinter from Malaysia. He's actually asked me some questions regarding your lifts. So he wants to know what your maxes are in the following lifts. So I'll just go through them. So the first one is back squat.
So back squat, I actually never maxed out in back squat when I was at UC Riverside. So we did front squats, and we did rear foot elevated split squats, which I liked it because to me it made me feel like I could be explosive and balanced on one foot, which if you've seen the hammer throw, there's a lot that happens on your one foot. And any throwing event, really any athletic movement. So I didn't really have a problem not doing back squat, but I think after I got out of college, I still never trained back squat, but I was just curious. And the most that I ever did was I did 500 pounds by 3. was the most that I did in back squat.
So that's probably like max out. That's probably at a guess almost just under 550. That's what I. Was that right down to the ground, or how far down for the?
That was as low as I could get. Yeah, it was
so
definitely
like almost like a full like down almost us to the ground sort of thing.
Yeah, as much as my body allowed. But yeah, it was deeper than 90. Yeah.
Okay. So like next, so the other lifts he was actually asking about, because this guy is like a bit of a techie when it comes to strength and conditioning training. So he's asked for power clean.
Power clean. The most that I did was 425. So with that, we never did cleans from the floor. It was always hang. So that max was a hang. It was a hang squat clean. But yeah, 425 was the most that I did.
Yeah, that's a massive lift for it. That's a hang. That's not right. So you basically, that's even more challenging than lifting it from the ground, because you don't have that added speed from lifting it to the ground. So you know, that's a massive lift. I mean, with 425 pounds, that's about, I'm guessing 180, 190 kilos of weight. So was that like, when you did the hang clean, was that just from the thigh, or was that drop it below the knee and then
it was above the knee. So it was, so we had the weight on the floor, kind of did like a deadlift to get it up to your hips. And then it was, I mean, they didn't really say how deep you had to go. But for me, I was fortunate that I was pretty strong. So I didn't really have to go down that low. So for me, it was maybe the bar moved maybe 4 to 5 inches down before I came up with it.
Okay. Also, so he's asking about your vertical, the best vertical.
Oh, I never tested my vertical, unfortunately. I don't want to give a number because.
Can you duck? Hey, Caleb, can you duck?
So.
Yeah.
Deadlift.
Well, currently I don't know, because I haven't played basketball in a long time. But yeah, when I was competing in college, or when I was at UC Riverside, and when I was in the Philippines, I was able to. I was able to get up there and do a couple things.
Oh, okay. So there's no official PB in the vertical, but what about, did you do deadlifts?
Deadlifts, again, I never maxed out on deadlifts, and a big reason for that is because I have a not very strong lower back. So my body was just more susceptible to those soft tissue injuries. So I did Romanian deadlifts. I did one-legged Romanian deadlifts, but doing a max true deadlift, unfortunately, again, I haven't done that. And a big reason for that is because when I was training, my strength and conditioning coach didn't see the value in doing the deadlift for applied strength to our throws. There wasn't enough reward associated with the risk of injury. So he found different movements that work the same muscles. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it just makes sense that he's just, the coach is just looking at, exercises that the payoff versus the risk of the exercises, and obviously decided that some more one-legged type stuff would be more, more rewarding than doing the deadlift. Would the same have applied with, say, for example, the snatch?
So the snatch, we did that, but again, it was hang only. So I was flexible enough to be able to do like a full squat snatch. The most that I ever did with that was, I want to say 330 pounds from the hang.
Is that like a close grip or a wide grip?
It was wide. So I my wide grip almost touched the collar, so I was maybe less than my pinky length away from the collars on my snatches.
Yeah, that's pretty wide grip. What about the bench?
Bench, the most that I ever did with that was 450 pounds.
So that's for 1 RM.
For 1 rep, and I did that. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, that's just those are all the questions that Jad had regarding. He asked mainly about lifts. So when we discussed diet, so basically with diet, were you on any particular diet when you were, at your prime and training, training for the hammer, or were you just instructed, okay, you can just eat as much as you want?
Yeah.
Or
so
as much as you want to a certain extent, like with avoiding certain foods, or was it just eat anything?
So there were people on my athletics team that were on dietary restrictions, but the throwers never had any. It was if we went to a track meet and then we went to dinner after, all of the runners, sprinters, jumpers would have to worry about how many calories they were eating. But for us, we could get meatloaf, we could get an appetizer, we could get dessert after that, everything like that. But I will say, so when I was in college, I didn't really pay much attention to my diet. But once I was with the Philippines, then I adjusted it a little bit just to make sure that I knew I was getting enough of the proteins that I needed, enough of the carbohydrates that I needed to make sure that I had energy to train throughout the day.
What sort of adjustments do you mean by adjustments from college to, obviously competing for the Philippines? Like, what sort of adjustments or changes did you make specifically?
So really what I did was make sure that, one, I was getting enough protein, but that it was clean protein. So I started eating a lot of chicken, a lot of, if I had like ground meat of any kind, I made sure to get it with the least amount of fat that I could, and then make sure to have some type of carbohydrates and vegetables with each meal. On my training days, I would have a lot more carbs in my meals than on my off days, but that make sure that I had at least a gallon of water a day. But yeah, for the most part, the biggest thing that I adjusted was just making sure that what I was using to fuel my body was clean for the most part. And of course, because I didn't have to cut any type of weight, I could get away with having cheat meals every now and then and not have to worry about making up for it in training or anything like that.
Can I ask as well, as the same as Bruce, you have a Filipino mum. So my question is, and so do I, so do you, so does Bruce. My question here is, did you guys eat a lot of rice in your household growing up, or?
Oh, I had rice every day. I had rice for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
When I was in, when I was in the sport, I wasn't getting sort of rice for breakfast, but when I went down and worked in, the sports academy in the province, I was getting served rice for breakfast and dried fish. That's what happened. So what about you, Caleb? What was the staple in the Stuart household growing up?
There was always rice with, I didn't have rice with my breakfast really until I came out to the Philippines. But yeah, rice with lunch, rice with dinner. I love red meat, so I would always try to have steaks when I could. But yeah, definitely I've had a lot of rice in my life.
What was Dad totally fine being served rice for lunch as well, or did he kind of like, just have something else sometimes, or?
Who did? You said my dad?
Yeah.
No, I mean my dad was.
He was cool with it.
Yeah, he was fine with it. He loves food of any kind. So As long as there was a meal in front of him, he would eat it.
Awesome. So, yeah, so were you like, when you were obviously competing, were you on supplements like, proteins and creatines and whatnot?
I tried creatine in college, but it made me cramp up a lot, so I didn't do creatine. I did protein. So in college, I got different types of protein. I had whey protein and I had casein protein. I'm not a dietitian or a nutritionist, so I definitely am not going to make recommendations. But what I will say is, for myself, what helped me a lot was having protein shakes. So
Yeah.
being on the go, everything like that, being able to put protein powder in water, in milk, in almond milk, anything like that, definitely helped me out a lot. And then other supplements that I had was fish oil or flaxseed oil. I would have that in the mornings when I would have breakfast, and then a multivitamin. And every now and then, when I felt like I wasn't getting good rest, I would have uh, calcium, magnesium, zinc pill that I had.
Yeah, that's to avoid getting like cramps and muscle spasms, right? That calcium magnesium pill. Because I used to have to take a bit of that when I was running the 400s. Because like I always got, like in the middle of the night, I'd be sleeping and then, I'd get like a leg muscle spasm or a massive just like bolt cramp in my leg if I didn't, take some of that stuff before I went to bed. Like after running a 4, it wasn't evident at the time, but man, sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night in pain because of the wear on the muscles. It just goes bang. Sometimes I was like,
yeah.
But I found the magnesium helped sort of like alleviate that a bit. Like it stopped it from happening as much when I was taking the mag tablets. So can I ask, are you still keeping fit these days? Are you still exercising, still going to the gym, or do you have a exercise routine these days?
Yeah, so with all of the COVID shutdowns, I wasn't able to go to the gym for a while. But now out here where I am in Southern California, things are starting to open back up slowly. So I'm trying to stay active. Obviously, I'm not training as intensely or as consistently as I was when I was training for athletics. But yeah, I'm definitely trying to stay active and keep my body moving around.
Are you doing anything like different in terms of exercise to when you're an athlete besides, I don't know, like besides lifting? Are you doing more sort of jogging and that sort of stuff as well? Like more all-rounded?
So jogging, I sometimes do, but it's more walking than jogging, just because running isn't really like, jogging that didn't ever really suit my body. But playing basketball and stuff, that was different because you're on a court, short sprints. I'm fine with short sprints. It's the long, slow jogging that did not go well with me. And I'm not lifting as heavy anymore because I'm not really motivated to be stronger. Now my motivation has changed. It's more so just to be healthy in general. So
just maintenance now, right? Not so much trying to peak, but just trying to, stay healthy and maintain the body rather than, trying to push it to new limits in terms of performing and that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so I'm just going through some stats here. So will you still hold the SEA record in the hammer throw at, I believe it was 68, 66. That was what I came up with. I knew it was 68 something. I think it's 68, 66. But if I'm wrong,
sounds right.
One of the viewers will probably correct me on that. But yeah, so no one's managed to break that yet. I mean, the Southeast Asian Games record's gone, but the Southeast Asian record, which is at all competitions, is still there. I mean, we were going to invite Bunawan from Thailand onto the show, but he may not have shown because he said his English isn't that great. And I've been, chatting with him a lot. his athletics, and he's now stepped up as the SIA champion after Song Chu of Malaysia got it last time, and then now Bunawan's now taken the #1 spot. I believe his PB is 67.43, I think it is. So he's still a good meter off your mark at that with that Southeast Asian record at 67.40, 68.66, and 67.43 being the games record.
I got a question.
Yep.
Caleb,
Yeah.
I mean, since we're here in California, how does it feel to have that record? I know for me, I keep that close to me in my heart, even though it's been broken, but I always remember having the record representing the Philippines. How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I know that my records aren't going to last forever, and I hope that they don't. I would love to help coach Filipino-American athletes to be a better athlete than I was. But yeah, I mean, the experience that I had with just Filipino athletics, the experience that I had at the SEA Games in Singapore, I keep the medal next to me. I don't wear it, but I keep it next to me as a reminder. And yeah, it's going to be something that I'll tell my kids about, I'll tell my grandchildren about. But it's always going to be an awesome and humbling experience. And yeah, whenever I think about it, I still get goosebumps sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you won a lot of medals here, but that one record, it sticks with you for a long time. So congratulations on that, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, the SEA Games medal that I got is by far the medal that I'm most proud of, because it was a big stage, and also because it felt like for each of those throws that I had, that the entire nation of the Philippines was just right there with me. So it was definitely something that I hadn't felt before, and obviously something that I hadn't felt since.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was awesome. I, remember, sitting in that stadium and watching you and Ernell, like, and the others throwing, and watching you win that gold back in Singapore in 2015. That was really something special for the country at that time. So moving on, regarding future plans, I believe that you had a good set of discussions with Jim Lafferty, who's also been talking to other athletes who are moving on with their work careers. He's spoken with another guy over in Scotland. I believe he spoke with the EU regarding any, like, with future advice. So was there anything that stuck out from what Jim had advised in regards to work recommendations or work or advice given?
Yeah, I mean, it's always, in my opinion, it's always a great thing to seek advice for people that have different perspectives or are at successful places in their lives. And obviously, Mr. Lafferty is super, super successful. So I did reach out to him for advice on career moves and everything like that. And yeah, I mean, he did a great job of helping me out, kind of guiding me. He referred me to other individuals who were able to speak with me and kind of give me the same type of guidance. But he helped me out a lot, because really before I got injured and before my track career came to an end, I hadn't ever even thought about work or a career outside of athletics, because I was always focused on that. And just getting his perspective, getting an understanding of the corporate world, the working environment, everything like that. Yeah, definitely grateful to him.
So again, we did touch base, but just need to repeat the question again as we went live at the time. So you were mentioning before that you began off, after you finished with your athletics, you began off in insurance, but then made the move after a few years over to the IT sector. Just for the viewers, can you just describe regarding the change and what a bit about what you're actually doing now for work and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I was in the insurance industry for a few years, and it was life insurance for a little while, and then it was home auto insurance after that. And I was very unhappy, really, since I stopped doing track and I stopped being able to compete and be competitive with other people and with myself. I just never really felt the same. And I was just kind of being very passive with my life, passive with my path and everything like that. So really, it wasn't until just before COVID hit the United States, which was about a year ago, when I really sat down and reflected and thought what I would like to get into and what I could do that suits me. And I love to help people. I love to be a type of mentor, and I love to give advice for anyone who wants to hear it. So yeah, so now I'm with a company called Mission Cloud Services. We work with Amazon Web Services, and basically we do consulting for businesses who keep their infrastructure in the virtual cloud above us. So it's definitely a lot better now, and it suits me because I can go up to any business owner or anyone who manages any type of cloud infrastructure and just ask them questions and try to help. And one thing that I love about this company that I work for is we never try to we never try to upsell in a way that doesn't benefit everybody involved. And it's really something that I hadn't experienced before in the corporate world. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what's ahead for me decades from now, but I know that right now I'm definitely very happy where I'm at.
So you feel that now you're in a much better place than you were with your life, say maybe four or 5 years back, right?
Yeah.
But it is obviously taken some time to heal and sort of, realize that you've got to move forward in terms of what you're doing in life, because obviously, the athletics part of life is just, it's not even half, you're gonna live, if you live to be 80, it's not even, you haven't even really lived half your life once athletics is really over.
Right.
And I'm sure Bruce can also relate to that as well. You've got to move, you've got to just push on, because, you might be an athlete, but that's still less than half your life. You've still got another, 30, 40, 50 years to go. So you've got to plan what you're going to do moving forward. So that also brings us to the next section that we're going to discuss. So we're going to touch base on throws coaching. So I guess this is basically for Bruce as well, if he's interested. It's like, so my point is that there's a lot of kids in the Philippines who are asking me for advice on coaching for throwing, and being a sprint coach, being a middle and having a bit of knowledge in middle and a little bit in hurdles, but not not really that much in hurdles and jumps. But there are lots of kids asking about throws coaching. I'm like, I really wish I could help, but I don't know anything about throwing. It's the event I don't know about. So I'm just going to ask as well, because we also have a coach from the National University in Laguna, Henry Chinico. So Henry, if you're there and you want to, feel free to ask either of these two guys any questions on throwing events. Honestly, you know, we have a former record holder and the medalist, and a current record holder, Games gold, here regarding hammer and shot put. But Henry, if you want to ask any questions, so we're just welcoming Coach Henry on board from Laguna, also with the National University of the Philippines at college level in the Philippines. So Henry, if you have any questions you'd like to ask on throwing to these two, feel free to ask. The floor is yours.
What's up, Henry?
What's up, Coach Henry?
Hello, good morning, sir. Good morning. Regarding the tapering period in throwing, what can you advise for those who are competing in high school level? Can they lift weights for 6 days before the competition, or much shorter, or 4 days before the competition? What can you say about that?
Well, Caleb could answer that.
So the way that I did it was I didn't look at every single track meet as an opportunity to have my best throw. Sometimes I did have my best throws of the season in the middle of the season. But I would sit down with my coaches, and instead of looking at it from week to week, we would look at the whole season. So we would still lift heavy in the beginning of the season up until 2 or 3 days before the meet. And then as we got later into the season where I wanted to have my peak performance, it would still be the same thing. I would lift until maybe 3 or 4 days before the meet, but my lifting would be very light. So it would be maybe 50 to 60% of my max lifts and what I was doing. And that's just to make sure that I'm explosive and that my muscles are triggering, but that I'm not tiring them out so that they can be fully rested and ready to go on the day of the meet.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is the off season. That's when you lift really heavy, you get stronger, you get faster, and then when the season starts, then you just go by how your body feels. You know, throwers, we could go to the extreme. Sprinters might be different, but throwers could probably lift. They can lift every day, you know, but you do need some rest.
Thank you, sir, for the insight.
You're welcome. Do you have more questions for us?
Another thing, sir, is during the tapering period for throwing, is that how many days do you taper for major competition?
For major competition,
Yes.
it'd be 3 to 4 days. And it would be, I would lift light the days leading up, and then maybe 3 or 4 days before, not focus on lifting, but instead focus on throwing. And even then it would be with lighter throwing implements. But yeah, for the big meets, sometimes I would lift maybe 2 days before, but for the most part, it would be maybe 3 or 4 days before. And again, it would be very, very light.
Thank you, sir. Wonderful.
I have a question to Caleb and also probably Bruce regarding training. This might be of interest to Henry as well, Coach Henry as well. So Caleb, like, how important do you feel that, you know, things like remedial massage and other similar things to aid recovery. So were you getting like, I don't know if you had acupuncture or, like dry needling or like ultrasound done or, like remedial massage, deep tissue. What sort of recovery mechanisms did you incorporate into your program before? And, like how often were you, say, having a massage done?
So when I was at university, I would get a massage maybe once a week. But rest and recovery is just as, if not more important than working out, because if you break all your muscles down when you're training and you don't give yourself time to recover and for your muscles to rebuild, then that's when you're gonna either decrease in your strength and your performance, or you'll get injured, or both. So when I would be lifting heavy and training heavy, like in the off season and in the beginning of the season, I would have an ice bath, probably 2 to 3 times a week. And again, I would try to get massages when I could, but I couldn't always get one. Ideally, I would get at least one a week, but it didn't really work out that way. Unfortunately, I never got to try acupuncture as an athlete. But yeah, again, the recovery and the rest is very, very, very important as an athlete.
Yeah, we were told in our level 3 Athletics Australia course by our lecturer regarding sprints and hurdles training that the big 3 in recovery were sleep, nutrition, and hydration. We were told those are the big 3. He said that everything else helps a bit, but those 3 are where you get the most gains in terms of recovery. So it's the simple factor of getting enough sleep, nutrition. So basically, as you said, the protein, getting that protein in to sort of heal up the body, and then of course hydration. So I know a lot of coaches in the Philippines, not all but some, because I've heard this, that some coaches basically saying to their athletes not to drink water when they train, which I've kind of had to talk them out of, because it's sort of like, no one's really a camel, but you have to drink. You've got to drink. You've got to hydrate yourself. So like water, fluids, electrolytes, Gatorade. You need to just the fluids need to keep coming in to the to keep coming into the body in order to allow the athlete to sort of not dehydrate, because Philippines is very hot, and you're sweating all the time and you're losing fluid, so you need to replenish them by taking in taking in that water, and in some cases the added salt in Gatorade or Powerade or whatever sports drink you're using to replenish the body. Okay, cool. So Coach Henry, have you got any more, or Bruce or Coach Henry, do you have any questions?
I have one more. I have one question left for the both of the great guys. Before you throw, you're on the deck. You're on deck. You have 3 seconds to execute the throw. What you guys thinking before you throw that? I don't know if you think of something before you throw, before that big competition.
Bruce, go ahead.
I only get 3 seconds. I guess it's right before I walk into the ring. Is that what you're trying to say? I mean, right? Okay.
Yes,
so,
sir.
I mean, you have, depending on how you've been throwing, you get 6 throws. For example, we have 6 throws. Depending on what the situation you're in, it changes. Your last throw, you probably want to, you think about everything the mistakes you've done and the things that you've done good. So you just want everything, you want that perfect throw. So I just try to, just try to fix my mistakes and then just throw. That's just me. So that's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, I've done that plenty of times, where it's leading up to the throw. I'm trying to think about all of the cues that I focus on to make sure that I have the correct technique, that the hammer has the correct orbit around me, that it has the correct trajectory. And I think about that maybe, obviously, days before, hours before, minutes before I throw in competition. And right before it's my turn to throw. So as I walk into the ring, I start to see the throw myself. So I see the throw that I want, and I imagine what it feels like in my body. And instead of trying to think about it, and it's like what Bruce was saying, you just throw, because what really, and I can't speak for running events, but for the throwing events, the more you think, the less distance you're going to get. So the better that you can get into the throwing ring and just think throw, like be confident in all the training that you've done, be confident that you're going to have a successful throw. And again, it's different situationally. There are some situations where you might need to slow down, you might need to make sure that you get a good mark. But whenever I had my best throws was when I was relaxed going into it, I was confident walking into the ring. And during the throw, I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just focused on how my body felt.
That was an excellent
Thank you,
question, Coach. That was an excellent question. I mean, yeah. So looking at that, it's basically getting everything done in training and then just letting it flow in almost autopilot mode once you're in the ring. I can honestly relate to that doing sprints, because I mean, I used to, go to bed and visualize and, just constantly thinking in bed about the sound of that gun, and don't have to do that anymore, which is a relief. But like, it was just like I'd go to bed and just really visualize the whole race the next day. So that's just some insight on a running perspective of what Caleb and Bruce just explained from a thrower's perspective. But from a runner's perspective, you just visualize the whole race. And when you think about the sprint, it was over in 11, 10 seconds, 12 seconds. Like, it may not seem like a very long time, but what I felt was, even though it was 11 or 10 or 12 seconds, that time of 12 or 11 seconds was honestly, just slowed down. So you could actually feel like it actually was longer than that, because the way it's being perceived is like, it's like almost in slow-mo. The whole thing's just in slow-mo as it's being synchronized. But like, even though it may sound to somebody like 11 or 12 seconds, it honestly, sometimes felt like about a minute, because everything's done in training, so it's just executed and synchronized, in a sort of pattern or a autopilot sort of thing. I was going to ask this next question to Caleb, and Bruce could answer this one next. So Caleb, we're going back to the 2015 SEA Games where you threw. I believe that, you came into the SEA Games with that 68, 66 meter throw at a meet over in the US. So you already had the Southeast Asian record going into the SEA Games. But, that was also your first SEA Games, that 2015 one. So you hadn't represented the Philippines at that point. And obviously going to the SEA Games is very different to competing in the US, because I mean, that would have been a massive, crowd and a totally different environment, totally different country. Like, could I ask you, when you went to the SEA Games, did you go in feeling okay, or were you quite nervous, at your first SEA Games, even though you'd just thrown, something that probably put the fear of God into everybody else? were you still a little bit nervous going into that, that first SEA Games, or after your first throw, did you feel fine?
Yeah, I was very nervous. I was nervous. I was scared, but I was also very, very excited. It's a huge change, different country, biggest meet, representing an entire country, and the expectation was to get the gold medal. So there was definitely a lot of nerves involved. Um, Nervous the days before when I was training and practicing on the practice fields, when I was lifting weights, and even during my warm-ups, during the announcements, I was very, very nervous. And my first throw, still, I think I fouled it. I was that was me getting my nerves out. So I fouled my first throw, and then I told myself, okay, you get that one. That was you getting your nerves out. So now you need to do what you're supposed to do. And once I told myself that, that's when I was able to walk in and just remind myself that I've done this before, that it's well within my power to win this meet and to get a gold medal for the Philippines. So yeah, fortunately, I was able to overcome my nerves and focus on the good and what I could do on the good end, as opposed to thinking about what would happen if I didn't execute the way that I was expected to.
Hey Caleb, so like I said, my first competition was in 1992. 2015. So could you imagine going into the Philippines as an 18-year-old? I think it was 18.
I cannot imagine.
By myself in the 1990s, early 90s. You imagine that, right? And there's no social media, there was no internet. So I went in there like, what? It's the Philippines. What I mean, but I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
So that was
Anyways,
the first time you've ever been. That was the first time you ever went to the Philippines, right?
No. I've been there when I was younger. I've been there like 3 times when I was like 5,
But not
10.
with the pressure of having to perform.
No, not at all. I was with my parents. So, but I went in there. But before I arrived in the Philippines, my picture was in the newspaper. I was like, what's going on here? I was like, what is this? And then they said Filipino-American arriving to compete in the national anthem. And I wasn't thinking of anything. And then when I read that, I was like, they expect me to do this and that. And I was scared out of my mind, man. At 18, and I flew by myself all the way across the country, all by myself. And that was something I'll never forget. But it turned out good. I like you did. My first throw, I messed up, and the second throw, I actually beat the national record, 18-year-old record.
There you go.
Yeah,
awesome.
I can relate to that.
Yeah,
I first went over to the Philippines to compete at nationals as a 15-year-old in the under 20s. Like, it was pretty good because, my mom paid for the trip and I went by myself, and I was 15, and I was thinking, I was running in the 100 heats and I was coming fourth, and I was thinking in my head, with 20, 30, 40 meters, with 30 meters to go, I was thinking, fuck, man, someone else paid for this trip. I better do better. So, I basically surged my way up into second and made it through the heats, and then won my semi, and then got third in the under 20 final against the older guys. So I basically was just thinking about my mum the whole time, how she, believed in me and put all that money into me going over there. So I just really dug deep when like that was my first, experience being over in the Philippines, having to compete, and the pressure was just, unbearable at the time. But I can see that, obviously I didn't compete at the same level as you two, but I can obviously understand, that I can't imagine really how much more pressure it has when you're expected to, win and then win at SEA Games. And, it must be unbearable.
Hey, Caleb, were you able to see the marks before you came? I'm sure you did, though.
The current records before I
Yeah.
came?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're probably like, I could do that in my sleep.
Yeah. So I actually, I think when I was a sophomore in college was when I first unofficially broke the national record, and so someone in my family sent me that and told me that. I was like, no way, I don't believe you, and it was true. So yeah, that was the first time that I thought it was a possibility, and then again I was focused on college track
Yeah.
until that was done, and then it all worked out that way. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, like what I found, or I'm not sure if Bruce and Caleb also found this same, but like I felt that competing in the Philippines is way different. It was way different for me than competing in New Zealand or Australia, because for a start, you know, like the level of organization of the meets is entirely different. Like, I mean, you know, it's like when I was at a New Zealand athletic meet, you know, I knew what I needed to do, but it was a little bit confusing the first times I competed in the Philippines, because, you know, there were lots of changes all the time about the program, and, you know, we're doing this now, we're doing that now. So it was, you know, a little bit harder to follow at first. The other thing that I found is a huge factor about competing in the Philippines was the weather. I mean, I'm originally from New Zealand, where it's very cold and it doesn't get into the 30s. You know, it's usually a summer is usually about 20, 25 degrees. So went over to the Philippines, and, you know, it's like being in a sauna, because you're just sweating the whole time when you're competing. When you're not running, it's like you're in a bloody sauna the whole time. Even when you're not competing, you're still sweating. So you basically have to just hide in an aircon room most of the time. And, you know, that's what I did the first time I went to the Philippine Nationals. Is, you know, I took refuge in that aircon room up the top, and, you know, went and sat with Lydia De Vega in the commentary box at that time. You know, like, and that was my break, was just going into that air conditioning room, because you're just sweating the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely remember the weather out there. Yeah.
And it's just, and I find though, even though, you know, Caleb had gone over to, you know, the Philippines or the SEA Games throwing 68, 66, it's harder, I think, to, you know, to replicate that kind of performance in the Philippines. I mean, you might go over to the Philippines, you know, with a best, you know, like for me, I went over there with 10.8, 10.9, but, you know, I never was able to go over to the Philippines and run much under 11.0. So it's hard, because, like, you know, I found that, like, I never did my best performances in the Philippines. They were always at New Zealand or Australian meets, because it's harder. Because one, for sprints, for example, the track ovals, you know, the track ovals in Australia and New Zealand are fast because they're made of Mondo and they're really bouncy, whereas you're running in the Philippines, you're running almost on like cement. Those are really hard ovals, so it's hard. As when I ran, I used to get a lot of bounce when I ran, so, you know, I couldn't replicate, you know, within 0.2 of my best times when I was over in the Philippines, because it was just harder to run on those tracks. But, you know, like, obviously Caleb would have went into the Philippines, you know, with a massive PB, but you know, the I guess the question is, you know, how hard is it going to be able to get closer to replicate these performances with the conditions in the Philippines to contend with as well, that you're not used to. And that's, you know, with a lot of foreign athletes, or half Filipino athletes who grew up in other countries, a lot of them, you know, come over to the Philippines and compete and just can't cope with the weather, or they just can't cope with the conditions, or how the things are done differently. So believe it or not, you know, you and Bruce honestly persevered there. But, you know, based on my, you know, like, observation over the last 20 years, maybe only about 1 in 5 guys who comes over from the States or from Australia or NZ or over in Europe or wherever they're from, come over to the Philippine Nationals and are able to do a performance which is, you know, not too much off their PB over in the other country, because it's obviously harder, I think, to compete in the Philippines when you're not used to those conditions.
Yeah, it's definitely different. The weather is one thing to consider, but there's also a lot going on that's different than the routine that you're used to, whether it's in the United States, in Australia, in another country, because you're going when you're not in the Philippines, you're familiar with your environment, your body's used to the climate and the temperature, and you can focus on what you're doing every day because it's more or less the same, or it can be if you want it to be. In the Philippines, it's not that way. At least when we take when I took my athletic trips there, um, it was a 16-hour flight. For me, the seats were small, Bruce. I don't know what the seats were like in the 90s, but I'm sure you had to cramp too. Yeah, so it was 16 hours sitting like this, then going right off, being jet lagged, and stepping off the plane to just start sweating immediately, and then having to not be able to immediately go rest, have to find a way to overcome the jet lag, and then meet all of the other individuals that are involved in athletics, in Filipino national sports, everything like that. It all plays a part, and it all takes attention away from what we're there to do, which is to throw and to ideally put on a great or our best performance. So I don't like making excuses. Um, so I'm not going to. I wish that I threw my personal best in the Philippines or in Singapore, but I am grateful, and I'm happy that I was able to perform close to that when it mattered. And I mean, very very rarely as an athlete are your conditions going to be ideal. There's going to be situations where, okay, I feel dehydrated, or I didn't sleep well last night, or I'm having problems with my boyfriend, girlfriend, mother, father, brother, sister, someone taking attention away. Um, and the great athletes in any sport are the ones who can overcome that and who can separate that and compartmentalize that, so that when they're in the ring, when they're doing their event, that's all that's there. So like just the ring, just the field. Once you get to that event.
Yeah, I think honestly, if we look at somebody in Philippine athletics, take for example EJ Obiena, he's basically been able to get through a lot, and also he's another
Yeah.
guy who's really greatly benefited from the sound, you know, mentorship advice of Jim Lafferty when it comes to, you know, dealing with situations. I mean, me and Jim had a chat about this before, and one issue that EJ had was that, you know, he needed to, you know, he was getting over anxious when he was jumping, so he was just getting too aggressive on the runway. So it was more, you know, being able to get in the zone and focus and being able to control his emotions, because he was just getting too overexcited and too aggressive and missing the mark all the time. So, you know, we had a chat with Jim, and we decided, you know, we opted that he needed to go to maybe a sports psychologist in order to control his emotions. And, you know, in the long run, along with the excellent coaching he's receiving from a world-class pole vault coach, probably the best world, you know, coach in the world at the moment, Petrov, who coached Bobka. You know, along with that, plus, you know, all the other aspects of his training he's improved, he's been really able to break through on the pole vaulting scene. And, you know, it took him a little while to accept the fact that, you know, that he needed help from a sports psychologist, because he was thinking in his head, you know, oh, I must be mental. There's something wrong with me if I do this, blah blah blah. You know, they might think I'm a bit crazy or whatever if I decide to do this. But eventually, you know, after missing out on some SEA games and some other competitions, he realised that's what he needed to do to push forward in terms of, you know, his athletic development. And I believe that's what you were touching base on when we talk about athletes having to just get through those, you know, those obstacles um, to, if they have a bad comp, they just have to think about, what happened, how can we do better next time, and just move on to the next meet, because you're not always going to have an ideal situation, emotional, relationships. Obviously, athletics is a funny sport because, even, sometimes to some extent, even if you have a ingrown toenail or a stubbed toe, that can even affect your performance.
Yeah.
So, even minor things can have massive impacts on performances, but, you've got to just get through them, and eventually you'll have a meet where everything just sort of falls into place and you get a PB. So, yeah.
Is he going to the Olympics? Is he representing the Philippines in the Olympics?
EJ at the moment, as far as I know at this point, Ernest Obiena is the only athlete in athletics to qualify outright for the Olympics, because the Olympic standard was 580 and he's jumped 581 and 586 during the qualifying periods. He's seeded, I think, like according to what Jim said, he'd get in the top 8, and then anything can happen from there. That's basically how I see it. I know that, dudes like, Duplantis, obviously he's in a league above everybody else. But what I'm saying is, once you're in the top 8, anything can happen on the day. So, he could be gunning for a medal. That's what he could be going for that bronze or, better, depending on how everyone else goes on the day. The other athlete from the Philippines who has a chance, but she hasn't qualified outright yet. But she's on the, like in the women's 200 meters, there's 56 slots and 32 athletes have run under 2280. And with her 2301 from the last Southeast Asian Games, Christina Knott's ranked 43rd out of 56. So she also has a chance, as long as she comes out and does, that 11:27 she ran when she broke Lydia's record the other day. That mark was outside the qualifying period, so she has to do it again. And like if she, with her 2301 from the SEA Games, she has a chance of, like she's ranked 43rd out of 56, but there's another 3.5 months, so she's probably going to have to come out and perform again to secure her selection.
What's her name?
Christina Knott from
Florida. Is she from
Florida?
Florida?
Yeah, Florida.
You know what? What's funny? My teammate in here in America, you guys probably know him, Otto Bolden. You know Otto Bolden?
Oh yeah, I know Otto. Back in the day of ICQ and MSN, we used to be chat mates. I know him very well. Yeah. He actually still remembers our talks, because we used to talk a lot about athletics and sprints. And as a kid, Bolden and Maurice Green were my idols growing up in sprints.
He was my teammate at San Jose City College, and he's the one that he told me about this girl from the Philippines, and he's from Florida too, and he just mentioned that girl. It's funny that he just brought her name up. I said, "Oh, okay, that's the girl that he mentioned to me."
Yeah.
Good luck to her.
Bolden's coaching Brianna Williams of Jamaica at the moment. I think he only coaches. Yeah. He's a private coach. He's not with a college or anything like Carl Lewis out at the University of Houston. Bolden is coaching just Brianna Williams, I think, or maybe 1 or 2 athletes, because he's a private coach. Because he's very busy with his. I'm not sure if he works for ESPN or he's a sports commentator for athletics now.
He's the commentator for all the track, U.S. track and all track.
Yeah, he's an athletics analyst or commentator these days. Yeah. But he on the side he coaches Brianna Williams, who ran I think a 10:94 at the Jamaican Champs. So she's like the 3rd best Jamaican behind Fraser Price and Elaine Thompson. So yeah,
a fun fact in junior college, he only benched 135 pounds.
Oh really?
But he went to UCLA. He went to UCLA a year after, benching 335.
He's not a huge guy as well. I mean, he's only like, for a sprinter. I mean, obviously, like everybody's taller than me, but like, Bolden is only like about 5'8" or 5'7". He's not a big guy, but he looks really big. He looks huge on the TV because he's just ripped. But he's only 5'8".
Caleb, you know who he is?
Bolden?
Otto Bolden? Yeah.
Ran for Trinidad and Tobago.
I think so. I think I know what you're talking about.
He went to
Maybe-
UCLA.
What you do is maybe look at the 2000 Olympics. He finished second behind Maurice Green in the 100. He trained with Coach John Smith. He was with John Smith.
He went to UCLA for a couple of years.
He ran 986. He ran 986. So Bolden's interesting because he went to 4 Olympic Games and he got medals at all of them, but he never won a gold at the Olympics. He was like, he got bronze, silver, and then I think another bronze. So he never won because he's always up against somebody who had the edge on him. Like in the 96 Olympic Games, which was the one that really inspired me to take up sprints, Bolden was winning most of the way, but then Donovan Bailey of Canada came back, 10 meters behind, come from about 6 to run over the top of everybody in that race right at the end. And, that was like really what got me into athletics was Bailey's 984 run at the Olympic Games where he was coming like 6 and then just ran everybody down. I was thinking, it's when I saw that, I was thinking, this is, the best thing about athletics is that, even if you don't start off the best, you can still win the race if you time it well. That's what really got me into the sport, just seeing Bailey win that race in 96. So if there's any more questions regarding coaching, obviously we didn't have that many questions from kids or anything like that because one, they're usually pretty shy, and secondly, it was pretty early in the Philippines. It was like 8 or 9, and they're probably in classes at the moment, or some of them are probably still tucked up in bed. But the good thing about this going live stream is that this will be on the channel, so people who weren't able to catch the live stream, they'll be able to tune into this later. And obviously, I'm just asking again if anybody's into coaching, if they can give Caleb a buzz. I had a lot of people on Splash Runners express interest before, and in throws coaching, especially a lot of kids out of provinces and stuff who just are not working with coaches at the moment. And honestly, I honestly think that in the Philippines, even though there's a few throws coaches, that's like, in the Philippines, there are plenty of distance coaches. There's plenty of distance coaches. There's plenty of long distance coaches. There's still quite a lot of sprint coaches, but there's a few less hurdles coaches. There's pretty much only 1 or 2 people who can coach pole vault. Honestly, in throws coaching, in the Philippines, there's not that many compared to some of the other events. So, you get kids who are, the number of kids in the Philippines that is interested in throwing, is not, it's the number of coaches that are available in throwing. It's not enough for the number of kids that are interested in throwing. I mean, we got to, I would say that, you've got maybe a dozen or so throws coaches in the Philippines who are specialist throws coaches. But there's thousands of kids who want to do throwing, and obviously I am a firm believer that a coach, due to having a limited amount of time and a limited amount of resources and a limited amount of patience to some extent with programs, can only handle a certain amount of athletes before the level of the athletes, focus or improvement starts to dwindle because you've taken too much on your hands. So for me, if you're coaching throws, that's an event where, you might not want to have, 50 athletes or more than 20 athletes because, obviously the amount of technical stuff that goes into coaching that level or that level of technique is going to be, it's going to get very difficult because I guess in throwing, each athlete that you work with has individual things that they need to work on rather than just giving everybody the same thing, which could be, in the middle, say for example, in middle or long. If you're coaching athletes in middle or long, you know, they just need to really run and stay fit and, you know, do the mileage. So you can basically send them off on runs together and that sort of thing. It's easy to handle a large group. But in something like pole vaults or throws, and to some extent maybe hurdles, you know, it's a bit more technical. So, you know, it requires a little bit more one-on-one type training sometimes in order to boost performances of athletes. But, you know, like, even though we weren't able to get any kids on deck today, I'm sure a lot of them will be watching through Splash Runners. Like I said, there is hundreds of kids looking for coaches at the moment in throws, because there's obviously, you know, there is throwing coaches in the Philippines, but they have a capacity on how many throwers they can actually, you know, they can handle. And, you know, there's lots of kids who really want to get into throwing and want to learn more about it. Obviously, as you said, Caleb, you might have to extend your range into the shot put and the discus. I'm not sure, you know, how proficient you are at coaching javelin, but, you know, like, I know that, like in the US, in high school, they don't do the hammer. I think they do it in, Coach Chinico, is it correct? In the UAAP, they do the hammer throw, right?
Yes, we are participating in hammer throwing, the UAAP.
So in the Palarong Pambansa, in the high school level, there is no hammer throw. It's only shot put, discus, and javelin, the same as in the US. I mean, in the US, I mean, you've got indoor meets, and they do that weighted throw thing as well. But, you know, in the Philippines, it's the same as what you encountered in the US, Caleb, where they're going to do javelin, shot, and discus, and there's no hammer. The other thing that, if you're coaching kids online in the Philippines, Caleb, that you need to probably be aware of, and I've had to, you know, coaching kids online in provinces, I've had to be aware of this to a certain extent as well, but probably not to the extent that you will need to be, is the availability of equipment. In some places in the Philippines, they don't have throwing implements. In some places in the Philippines, you know, they might not have a throwing circle. They might just have a field that they're throwing on. So you have to be adaptable. And this is something this is a challenge, I guess, of UAAP coaches when it comes to coaching, because in some UAAP schools, they're used to just having everybody together and training them pretty much, you know, almost identically, and then sending them off to do their particular skill sets, but still in groups. In the COVID situation, with online chat training, I've been doing online training for about 10 years now, so I'm sort of used to it. But a challenge that coaches face in online training is this, especially in the COVID situation when places lock down, more individualized programs. For example, you might have a kid, like this is in sprints, for example, you might have a kid and they might not have access to a track oval. They might not have access to, they might have a dirt oval, or they might not. They might have to train on the road. They might have a gym. They might not have a gym. They might have a pool. They might not have a swimming pool. You know, they might be in an area where they can't even go outside, and they have to do a workout in the house. So there are, you know, like lots of variables with coaching online, which, you know, allow adaptability in terms of programs, because, you know, just due to the situation, you know, it's already challenging coaching online, but it's even more challenging with restrictions in place due to COVID to sort of, you know, like as a coach, you know, I believe that it's as much an art form as it is a science. I think it's a 50-50 split. So that's where the creative side of being a coach comes in, when your kids don't have access to certain things, you know, which they usually would in their event, where you have to improvise and do things a bit differently. Like, for example, you know, being a coach at a sports academy in the south of the Philippines and going through government, it takes forever to get through things, you know, to get things from the school. So what I had to do was, instead of spending a lot of money on medicine balls, my assistant coach went out to the $2 shop, and he bought, like, you know, balls for 50 pesos, about $1 each, filled them up with water, he weighed them, and those were our medicine balls. Or we filled them up with sand. Or, you know, he got pipes, and he constructed mini hurdles for me out of pipes and wax, because we just didn't have time to wait for the government to provide us with the material. So one of the challenges of being a coach online, especially kids in the Philippines, is having to improvise the programs. And honestly, I would take on, you know, maybe a couple of kids and see how you go, and then you can add a few more if it works out fine. That's what I would recommend in terms of just start off with a couple of kids and then just slowly build. That's my advice to you when it comes to coaching online, is to, you know, just don't get too many kids at the start. Just get a few and then add a little bit more as you know, you realize, you know, how much time and how much you know, how much effort you could actually put into the project.
Yeah, so I'd love to help and coach other Filipino athletes that are coming up. Um, Obviously, my specialty is the hammer throw, so I'm confident in my ability to coach that event. I could also coach the shot put and the discus, but I know that my technical skills and my eye for watching technique and correcting it is not as good as it is with the hammer. Um, what I have done with some athletes out here is I'll have them send me video of their throw, and then what has worked. I've tried like texting out corrections, but it doesn't work out that well, especially because so much of it is visual. What I like to do is I'll send. There's a couple hammer videos that have really good angles of the top hammer throwers in the world throwing. So what I'll do is if I see an opportunity for improvement in someone's technique, I'll send them that whole video, and then I'll take screenshots of the specific things, like the specific positions that they want to be in or that I would like them to be in, and then give them the timestamp as well. And then instead of just texting them, they see it visually so that they can at least try to get a better understanding. And that's had some effectiveness. What I will say also, Coach Henry, I'm happy to help you and your athletes if you're open to help with coaching. You can send me videos, you can send me messages, and I'll do what I can. I know it won't be as good as in-person coaching, but yeah, my goal is to help the person who's going to break my records.
I was just going to touch base on that because, you know, I'm coaching 18 kids online, but in some cases in the past, I'm just thinking about, as of the moment, not really so much, but I do, you know, in the past I have worked I have had to work with other coaches, like what happened with Akla, and where I was working with Bihosif in the middle distance, and you know, her sister was her coach, and she was basically liaising with me. So yeah, in some situations, if the athlete does have a current coach, the situation is that sometimes we need to liaise or coordinate with the current coach to make sure that the coach is on board with the structured program which is in place. I mean, I think a lot of coaches would appreciate that because, you know, I think that, you know, when we talk about not many throwing coaches in the Philippines, I honestly think when it comes to hammer throwing, it's probably maybe 2 or 3, if that, you know, like actually coaching that, like specifically coaching the hammer throw. Probably the same as, you know, probably the same or less as what coaches the pole vault at the moment. It's an event which is really not just unusual, but, you know, like a difficult event in athletics. You know, the 3 events that have the least amount of coaches in the Philippines are the hammer throw, the pole vault, and the walks. Those 3 events have the least amount of coaches in the whole country. You know, there's lots of distance, lots of middle. There's quite a few sprint coaches, like probably not as many hurdles coaches. Like there's quite a lot of jumps coaches, but yeah, sprint, pole vault, hammer, walks, like pretty much, you know, like probably less than 10, like in those events, because they're just events which are like a bit more difficult and not usually not always part of an athletics program, especially at the high school level. As of now, in the national high school champs, the Palarong Pambansa, there is no hammer, but walks and pole vault have already been introduced recently. I don't know if they would introduce hammer, but I guess it's a event mainly that they want more physically mature athletes to engage in. Okay, so yeah, so we can also try that route as well as touching base with like with other university coaches or with coaches who are interested in having help for their athletes in the throws events, perhaps sending videos for analysis and that sort of thing. The other thing I mentioned is hammer throw is that like that also could be more of an issue with availability of having a hammer or hammer facilities might be
I mean for doing drills, they don't the athletes don't need a hammer like that. I did plenty of drills that was with like a medicine ball tied to a rope or just a broomstick. So there's plenty of ways to work technique without having the implements in all the training sessions.
Yeah, I'm sure that coaches such as Coach Henry and others and athletes would be very interested in, like looking at ways of improvising how to train for the hammer event, because honestly, hammers are not cheap. I think probably not so much as poles, but they're not cheap to get. And, like not everybody has access to them. I mean, I'm pretty sure most coaches would have a set of discuses and a set of shot puts, but, a hammer would probably not be something every coach would have. So, any improvisation tips for kids and coaches would be of, great help to them because, honestly, I think hammer's a great event and, it's got a lot of room for growth and potential in the Philippines and the Southeast Asian region. But, I think a lot of athletes and coaches might shy off from it because they're probably thinking, oh, it's too difficult. Oh, we don't have a hammer. It's too expensive to get one of those. We don't have a hammer cage or a throw circle. So, how are we going to train for that event? And I think that it's just that improvisation and those drills and that sort of thing that really needs to be brought on board to help, the growth of the event and encourage, more kids to take it up.
Yeah, and Andrew, if you know any coaches that want suggestions, advice, drills to do with nothing, with hammers or with substitute equipment, just point them my way. Like I said, like you can do drills with shot puts because it's the same weight as the hammer, and that's men's and women's. I don't know how many times, but multiple times a week, I would throw not even in the ring. I would just find a slab of concrete, of asphalt, sometimes even dirt, and just do turns there. You can just have like a dumbbell, a kettlebell, or a plate, like a weight plate, and do turns that way. There's a lot of things you can do. It won't be the same exact feeling, but you can kind of piece that together. Another thing that you could do to get an idea of countering the weight of the hammer with all the momentum you put in it is having a rope and attaching just a handle to a pole or something like that, and have them sit against it and do little like quarter turns like that to get a feeling of the hammer. And yeah, I mean, hammers are expensive. They can break easily. The wires can break easily. The handles can be weird shapes. Yeah, there's always a way if you want to find one. And I do have a couple ways. And if there's anything that I already have done that doesn't suit an athlete or a coach or a situation, then I'm more than happy to try to brainstorm and find a solution.
I was just asking because having coached sprints, I'm just asking you because in sprints it takes me about 3 months of teaching drills to get an athlete to be proficient from a beginner. My question to you is in hammer throwing, how long, like let's say for example, you're starting with someone who's a beginner. Probably you won't be starting with someone who's an absolute beginner. You'll be probably with people who've done discus or shot put before. But like, how long does it take, in your view, for somebody from being a beginner or learning the basics of the hammer to be able to actually join a meet, or being able to like sort of regularly compete? Like, how long do you reckon it would take roughly to get someone from being a beginner to being, able, proficient enough to say join a meet?
It really depends on the level of the meet. I mean, I've competed against athletes who could only do one hammer turn and threw it. So, I mean, technically you can compete, but like being able to compete and be competitive, it could take, I want to say, 6 months at the very least. I think when I started, it took me, I want to say, 3 to 4 months to where I could actually get a good throw. But I had a lot of different things that obviously needed a lot of fixing. My hammer form, even when I threw my personal best, had tons of room for improvement. So I think the more patient that you could be in the beginning to learn the technique right, the better you'll be off in the long run. Because what I did was I learned as fast as I could, and it got me to a certain point, but I needed to relearn a lot with a different coach.
You really need
once I got to a different point.
So you really need to just take a like a few steps back to take a bigger step forward in terms of your
exactly
development. And
yeah, but I would say like being optimistic, 6 months, and anything before 6 months is a bonus. So and also if it takes more than 6 months, it could take a year, it could take more than a year. You just have to keep at it. And if it's something that you want to do, or an athlete wants to do, then I'm more than happy to help out and give pointers and share the knowledge that I've accumulated up to this point.
Okay. Just final question regarding hammer. Is it like pole vault? Are there safety aspects involved with the hammer throw? Because obviously pole vault's a risky event if you don't do it right. So with hammer, are there protocols, that you would be putting in, like regarding the safety aspects of, throwing a hammer?
Yeah, so the hammer is very dangerous. I've fortunately never really hurt anybody, but I've gotten really close to really hurting people several times. So obviously the first thing, which is the same as discus shot put, is when someone's throwing, don't stand in the field. The safest place to be is behind the net, behind the ring.
Yeah.
But even then, implements can break, and that's I almost hit someone in the head because we were throwing in a chain link fence, and in the middle of my throw, the wire snapped and the ball shot out sideways. It shot through the chain link fence, and it was a little more than a foot away from hitting someone. So it
officials or something, or
what's that?
was it one of the tech officials that it almost hit, or?
No, it was another athlete.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, ideally you'll have a net that has strong durability, but obviously that can't always happen. That's not always the case. So whenever someone is turning, whenever someone's winding, whenever someone's about to throw, all eyes should be on that person.
Yeah.
And really expect it to come your way. And that
I've done
way,
technical officiating with retrieving discuses, but obviously I probably wouldn't be putting my hand up for, retrieving that hammer, because, that's even more of a, that's even more of a lethal sort of object than a discus. But we were told all that when we were officiating, that we need to watch the thrower, keep our eyes on the thrower at all times, and also sort of like stand on the edge or the side when they're doing the throws outside that outside the
sector boundaries.
Stand outside the sector and always never lose attention. So you obviously don't go on your phone, like when they're throwing. Otherwise, you might end up with disc in the back of your head. So, we were told all that. We got all that mentioned. Anyhow, so we'll just have to wind up now. As got to grab some lunch, but it's been good chatting with you, Caleb. So yeah, this will be also going out through the Splash Runners regarding coaching and that sort of thing. Obviously more on hammer, but if need be, when you look at discus and shot, if they require help with those events, also extending help out to the university coaches, because I think that when we look at hammer, they'd have to be like sort of late high school or early or college age, I guess, for that particular event. Okay, so we'll end today's session. Of course, this session will be, it's on the web page, so it can be referred to. I'll also post a copy of this video to Splash Runners, which is a community of 21,000, athletes who are 20 years old or younger from the Philippines, and particularly in the sport of athletics. So I'll be sharing this video. Does anyone else have any closing notes or any questions before we wrap up today?
Sure. Well, thanks. It was great to talk to you guys, meeting you guys. So I got 2 more years left before I retire. And after that, I might be going to the Philippines. To give back, and I do want to coach. I do want to help out. Hopefully, I guess I could go see Henry first, because you're the first coach I know. Maybe me and Caleb could go buy a house somewhere in the Philippines. And, right? We could do that.
I'm thinking that next.
That would be nice. That would be really nice.
So, coach. Huh? Yeah. But I'm definitely gonna make it to that where I'm gonna help. I'm gonna help Philippines. Surprisingly, I didn't know what to expect, but they did a lot for me, and I'm definitely going to give back. And when I retire from what I'm doing now, 2 years, I'm definitely going to do something, coaching, something, whether it's here and over there, I can make things happen. Well, I'll try to make things happen. So Henry, I'm gonna see you in 2 years, man, for sure.
See you soon, coach.
All right. So I don't know who's going to be watching this. I don't know who's going to be watching this, but
I guarantee a lot of people watching this, because it's it's on Pinoyathletics. So like heaps of people watch this. I've got a fan base of around 40,000 followers. So it's
okay. Well, some people don't know who I am, but hopefully I'll meet you guys one day. I had some great teammates in the Philippines: Lady De Vega, Elmo Moros, Ed Lascat, EJ's dad, Edward, OBN, Hector. Yep. So those were my teammates. And if you don't know me now, you're gonna know me in a few years.
It'd be good to see you get into coaching, because Ed's already made the move into he coached Eliana Nicholas now in the women's pole vault. 4-meter jumper. So it'd be good to see you making that transition into the coaching world.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so concentrating on retiring with my job right now. I'm a probation officer, so I got to get my 2 years in, and I'm done. So after that, me and Caleb are my house.
You've been at that job for pretty much the whole time, right?
What's that?
That's pretty much been your job for pretty much most of your adult life, isn't it?
Yeah. you know, unfortunately, I wasn't able to keep throwing like I should have due to injury. But I did. I was blessed to work for law enforcement here for 20 years, and I'm ready to go coaching again. So we'll see.
Cool.
But like I said, me and Caleb are gonna buy a house in the Philippines, and we're gonna try to find some 5'7", 5'8" shot putters, throwers, and we're gonna make them throw far.
we're gonna make them throw far, whether they like it or not.
Yep.
Maybe just go and or maybe just go and scout out some of the, like, go and grab some of the basketball dudes to
Yeah.
to like, you know, get them into throws, because honestly, if not everyone can play ball.
No.
I'll play basketball with the basketball guys. I'll try it.
There you go.
All right. So I guess that concludes today. It's been pretty awesome. We've been at it for about 2 hours, which is, you know, I thought I didn't have enough questions to last the show, but thanks everybody for showing up today to discuss throwing events in the Philippines, throwing coaching. As I said, I'll be posting this on to Splash Runners for further feedback. Yeah, so thanks everybody, and
Yeah.
Hey, Caleb, catch me in Vegas, man. Come meet me in Vegas, Caleb.
you tell me when you're going, and I'll be there.
All right.
I just I want to say thank you, Andrew, for setting it up. Bruce, great to meet you. I'll see you in Vegas, and I'll see you in the Philippines.
Let's do it.
Andrew, we can do this as many times as you want. It can be more focused conversations. It can be about being an athlete in general. It can be about anything. I'm happy to talk. And yeah, just let me know what you need.
I actually
Salamat, Coach Henry. It was good to meet you.
I actually had a
Thank
plan.
you, Sir Caleb.
Like, I'm not sure what. Sorry, Coach. Sorry. So no, I actually had a plan. I'm not sure how if it's going to push through because of COVID, but like I had a lot of travel plans for next year. Like honestly, my mum, you know, she wanted me to go over to Egypt and the Middle East with her, you know, as a holiday. So that's happening next year. There's obviously the SEA Games in Vietnam, which I have to probably attend if it pushes through, but I haven't bought my tickets yet because I want to make sure it actually does happen. Another plan I had, because I wanted to go and do the Altis training with Coach Dan Paff after doing my level 3 athletics, you know, coaching. I wanted to go over to learn, you know, elite sprint performance from Dan Paff at Altis, and I was originally going to do it online, but a friend of mine from Athletics Australia said I should actually go over to Phoenix and, you know, like actually do the course with them at Altis. So that's something that's possibly happening this year, but I'm not entirely sure if I'll be over to Phoenix at some point to go and learn from Coach Dan Paff. But, you know, that was on the agenda. Not, you know, financially it's okay, but the problem is because of COVID, you know, if you know, that would push through.
Yeah. Well, if you're able to make it out here, whether it's this year, next year, the year after, just let us know. Yeah, let us know where you're going to be, and we'll see if we can meet up.
Still, you know, I think
Phoenix is not that far.
Yeah,
how far would it? How far is it?
It's an hour flight, hour and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Hour flight, a few hours drive. Yeah, it's not that far.
Yeah. Because that's where the Altis thing is. So I was thinking of actually going there because I was going to do Altis online, and it's going to cost, you know, that would have cost me another, you know, about $1,000 to do online. But my friend said to me that, you know, I should just go over to Phoenix and do it because he said he knows Dan and the Altis guys. He said that I would learn a lot more actually going over there to learn, you know, how to coach than actually just doing it online. And, you know, for the learning that you get from one of the world's best sprint coaches. And I haven't actually been to the US before, so that would actually be quite a good experience for me, I think. But, you know, it just depends how COVID goes, and the fact that I've already got a trip, you know, planned over to Egypt and the Middle East, a trip planned over to the SEA Games, and I don't know if I'll be going over to the Philippines this year. So I could be, you know, I've got a lot of travel planned, but the COVID kind of like pushes some of it back in terms of you know, flights and that sort of thing. It's not so much financial, it's more just, you know, is it going to be possible? Are there going to be restrictions in place because of COVID?
Yeah, I mean,
Cool.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
hopefully in the States we're getting towards the tail end of it. It seems that way, but I mean, we won't know until it actually happens. So I mean, we'll see.
yeah.
okay, so we'll just wrap this up for today. So again, thanks everybody for tuning in. Definitely we'll be looking at follow-up, possibly about a week. I've just got to clear the plates at the moment with stuff at home, but after that, yeah, within about a week, we can have another chat. Hopefully, you know, get some kids on board at that stage, some more coaches on board, because how I see it, Caleb, is for me, with coaching, I began off, you know, like wanting to coach, but then I realized at a certain point that, you know, it's good to share knowledge with other coaches as well. And sometimes, you know, you have to coordinate with other coaches, such as Coach Henry and other coaches already coaching the athletes, because I mean, you know, like, just so the athlete gets the best of both worlds in terms of, you know, like their development as an athlete. And I think that, you know, I've had some great working relationships with, you know, with Coach Mai and Aklan, and also, you know, I'm working with Coach, what's his name, coach of UE, the high school coach at UE. I've been helping him with some athletes, and you know, like it's been, you know, like it's not sometimes yeah, it's great to help, you know, athletes one-on-one or directly. That's cool, but you know, I think that, you know, in some situations you've got coaches on board as well, which is you know, which is good, you know, good as well, because I mean, they learn, you learn, and the athletes get the best of both. So I think that it's a good arrangement as well.
Good. Yeah, let's definitely do it again, especially if you have people reaching out. If anyone wants to take me up on the offer, then we can do something more like this. It doesn't have to be recorded. But yeah, I honestly, whatever works, as long as the timing works, I'm happy to do it.
So yeah. So anyway, thanks everybody. We'll be ending today's session. So we'll keep everyone updated when the next one, we'll be doing the next one of these. I know it was probably short notice because I was kind of a bit busy, and I was, you know, we were just trying to work things out for this first live cast. Anyway, thanks everyone. If you know, Caleb, if there's any questions or anyone posts any questions, I'll just forward them on to you so you can get in touch with if it, you know, with the kids if they post something.
Yeah, I mean, if any kids are watching this, any athletes are watching this, you can message me on Facebook directly. Andrew, I can give you my email address if you want to hand that off to any coaches.
Or kids.
Or kids, yeah.
Yep. Okay. So thanks everybody. We'll end today's session. So tune in next time. I believe I'll be doing my next session on Sunday, but that's more, that'll be the updates regarding my Sprintopia virtual meet, which is ongoing at the moment. So Sprintopia is 1, 2, 400. I have, you know, about 100 athletes competing in Iloilo, Banyan, and Cagayan de Oro. So I'll have updates on those results this weekend. Okay. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and have a pleasant day.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
All right, Coach.